Rabbi Judy Shanks writes about her beloved 93-year-old mother-in-law, Estelle, who spends most of her days in bed. She reads a bit, watches too much news, dozes, wakes, and greets visitors with her signature smile. Estelle gazes at a collection of family photos at the foot of her bed, covering the entire span of her more than 9 decades. Looking at her younger self, she asks, "Wait, who is that?" "It's me with my little sister." "Oh my God, I never thought I would still be here. How did all this happen?" Rabbi Shanks marvels at how Estelle finds the strength to keep going, given all that age and infirmity have taken away from her. She could do little that marked the best years of her life, and she looks nervous when holding her own great-great-grandson on his first birthday. Rabbi Shanks asks us to consider Moses at the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. Approaching the age of 120 and the end of his life, Moses summons the strength to recount to the children of Israel the story of the Exodus and their desert wanderings. As Rabbi Shanks describes it, through Moses' reflections, we travel now on a different kind of sacred journey where past and present conflate, and the long and short views of one extraordinary man's life are woven seamlessly into a timeless guide for all future generations. Biblically, Moses' great final gift of leadership is to teach us all how to live our final days with gvura, with strength. We all need strength, whether we are facing the final chapter of our lives or we are encountering challenges at work or school, with our health or relationships, in our families and communities, or even as a nation or human family. But what is strength exactly? We are familiar with the words of the prophet Zechariah, "Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the God of hosts." Those words appear to suggest that strength, at least of a certain kind, is to be rejected. Rabbi David Schwartz observes that when people study Musar, Jewish ethical discipline focusing on tikkun midot, repairing the measure of their own souls, they often skip the character trait of gvura, of strength. He admits that gvura hasn't been expunged from the Musar literature, but it is often ignored, perhaps because of concerns about toxic masculinity. He writes, "Sure, we're proud of the Israel Defense Force, and may even take some guilty pleasure in reading the Holocaust literature that deals with the exploits of the forest partisans and the insurgents of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Yet we view these as the exceptions that prove the rule of the historic Jewish personality makeup that is mild, nonviolent, non-confrontational, deferential, and passive to a fault." Traditionally, Judaism has associated physicality with women and spirituality with men, signaling which was considered more important. Many ultra-Orthodox men will return another man's proffered hand with a purposefully limp handshake, tacitly indicating that spiritual, not physical strength is preferred. The other traditional way Judaism has discussed strength is meaningful. We learn in Pirkei Avot, sayings of our sages, that a strong person is one who controls their urges. That kind of strength is critical to being a good and noble person, but I'm not sure it helps us when we're feeling weak. Moses, at age 120, might well feel weak as he seeks to lead the Israelites on the final leg of their journey, particularly since he knows that he will not be privileged to accompany them into the promised land. Rabbi Shanks writes, Moses' final journey with his people requires him to access and explore his inner pool of strength and make it accessible to every Israelite who will, he prays, use it to bring holiness into the world he's leaving behind. She notes that he begins his historical review by reminding the Israelites of the times when they have sorely tested him. Rabbi Shanks writes, he begins his exhortation with a revelation of his own vulnerability and a judgment of the people who pushed him past his breaking point. That seems odd. For one thing, most people would not think of sharing vulnerability as a sign of strength. Our culture tends to punish leaders who admit uncertainty or confess missteps, which are treated as signs of weakness. But let's consider Joseph. As a young man and a favorite son in a position of strength, Joseph alienates his brothers by recounting dreams in which they all bow down to him. Later, at the height of his vulnerability in prison, he responds to the cupbearer and baker with humility when they beg him to interpret their unsettling dreams, responding, "Surely interpretations are in God's domain, but go ahead and tell them to me." Acknowledging his vulnerability, Joseph demonstrates his greatest strength, leading him to the pinnacle of power in Pharaoh's court. Second, we may well ask how Moses could be demonstrating strength by castigating others for their wrongdoing. Rabbi Shanks answers, Musar teaches that the midah of gevurah, the sole trait of strength, is connected with strict judgment, and thus must always be counterbalanced by chesed, loving kindness. That makes sense. We do associate a tough-on-crime attitude with strength. Just as God is both just and merciful, so must we strive to act with both strength and compassion. We must be wise, discerning the situations that call for strength and strict justice, and even when we are in such a position, we are challenged to find ways to be kind in the process. This week we read about the sacrifices that our ancestors brought to the temple in ancient Jerusalem. One offering was to be brought when a person unwittingly incurs guilt in regard to any of Adonai's commandments, accidentally doing something forbidden. Torah then begins delineating the prescribed sacrifices by focusing on the anointed priest who has incurred guilt. Imagine the vulnerability of the religious leader who acknowledges their own wrongdoing, however accidental, and accordingly brings a sacrifice in the sight of all the people. Turning toward the impact on the people, viewing the vulnerability of their leader, humbled before God and humanity, the priest's sacrificial act would enhance the strength of their community. Everybody makes mistakes, especially unintentional transgressions. Individuals who see that the priest has made such errors will be more willing to confess that they must have done the same. The process of sacrifice will free them of that burden of unintentional sin, enabling them to move forward with their lives and the performance of mitzvot, performing the thou shalts, not merely avoiding the thou shalt nots. Sitting with her beloved mother-in-law Estelle, Rabbi Shanks asks which strength she draws on now and will help her in this new last phase of her life. Estelle responds, appreciation and gratitude. Those are the most important. I don't dwell on the pain and disappointments. I'm lucky to get to say thank you to all of you. I'm not afraid of what is ahead for me, and I accept it is soon. But I don't know yet how I will say goodbye. That is the hardest thing to do, the bravest thing I will do. I'm gathering strength to say goodbye. So am I, Rabbi Shanks replies. So am I.